Welcome to another and different episode of Sparkcast. I am Sean.
Charlie.
And Thomas.
And we are...
Sparkcast.
Someone stresses the S a little too much. No, I'm just kidding. Today, in this episode, we're going to be looking at another non-Transformer sentient life. We're going to be looking at Brainiac from the Superman, the animated television show. Well, Superman, the animated series. Let me get it right in its retconned name, similar to how, Transformers Generation 1 is basically a retcon of the original series. And we're going to be looking at episode 1 of a 3-part origin story of Superman, which is called Last Son of Krypton, and episode 8, which is called Distant Memories, where Brainiac shows up for the first time and meets Superman. First, have any of you guys seen these episodes before?
Yes. In the distant past. I can't remember when I've watched Superman. I don't have this huge feeling of nostalgia. I remember watching it, but I don't even remember when. It was just something that was a blip in my childhood.
You probably saw it when everybody else saw it, which was when it was airing. Because this came out like in the mid-90s. I think this animated series started around 96.
This was after Batman, the animated series, and before... Was it before Beyond, or was it after Beyond?
It was after Batman season 1 and 2, but it aired during Batman seasons 3 and 4, which were on the WB.
Okay, yeah, I had it. It came out in 96. September 6th, okay. 1996 was
one second, I forgot my headphones, and I am recording with my speaker close by on next to my microphone. 1 second.
I actually was really into Batman, the animated series, and Batman Beyond. Those stick the most in my mind. But I did watch this show also. It just wasn't as memorable for some reason. I remember this episode vaguely.
I watched Batman the Animated Series growing up because I think for some reason there were so many episodes in season 2 that it was broken up into 2 years. There might have been a year break between Batman season 2 and 3 or something, because it seems like it was like 4 years later, because Batman was 1992, right?
Batman started in 92, September as well. So the first season had 65 episodes and they ran for a year. So the last episode of season 1 ended 2 weeks after the original air date the previous year. Then they took like a long break and didn't start up until May of 94. That was second season was only 20 episodes and it ended in 95.
You mean the Adventures of Batman and Robin that was still on Fox?
No, the animated series. Season 2 of the animated series.
Yeah, season 2 of the animated series was called The Adventures of Batman and Robin, but on subsequent releases, they've just relabeled it Batman the Animated Series Season 2.
Right. Okay, yeah.
Oh.
8 months until between the end of the first season and the beginning of the second season.
Okay.
It was only 20 episodes, and it ran from May 94 to September 95. They were definitely spacing out that second season.
Okay, so that came out the same year X-Men came out, and I was still watching those shows heavily. But I remember by the time Batman went to the WB, I wasn't interested in cartoons anymore. I think I only watched X-Men because I was about to be in high school in 96. That's when I stopped really watching cartoons. But I did go back and watch, I think Batman Beyond was the only new cartoon I watched just because it seemed cool at the time. So I just skipped all of Superman and Batman season 3, 4.
That's pretty much how I was. Like, those are the cartoons that I bothered to watch, and then I'd stopped watching the others. So this one kind of caught my attention. I'd watch it to, I guess, fill the Batman space, but it didn't really have that huge of an impact.
Yeah, I was all in on Batman when I was younger, so I was definitely watching all the reruns and everything. I tried to get into Superman, but it just never hooked me. Like I just never. I guess I didn't realize it at the time, or was willing to admit it, but I just found Superman boring.
Well, I think I know why. Is because I just finished the whole series. So my wife and I just watched the entire third and fourth season of Batman and any Superman episode that Batman showed up in. Because she had never seen all those before. She apparently, despite being younger than me, only watched repeats of the original series. So we watched all those. And I watched all of Superman as well at around the same time on my own. And I'm just like, it's just missing something from Batman when it comes to the villains. Like, all the villains aren't, like, sympathetic or over the top, or they're just kind of, it's not really focused on them a lot of the times. It's always Superman or Lois or sometimes Jimmy.
I guess I never really thought about that, but thinking back, I would probably say that that's definitely true. And I think it's true because when you think about it, most of the villains that come up against Superman, they don't really pose that different a threat. It's always usually just like, we're also strong guys, but guess what? Superman's stronger. It's not often that he fights the guys that actually have like magical powers or something that just poses a different kind of threat, or every now and then somebody has a piece of kryptonite or something like that. Usually it's just somebody who wants to use their speed or use their strength against Superman. Whereas Batman, those villains, everybody's kind of different. How he approaches them and their stories are also so very different.
The different environment in the show kind of turned me off from it. I like the darkness in Batman. A lot of Superman takes place during the day. Different type of issues, more urban type foes, like, big company guys making some kind of something that's better than Superman or something. And that's what I found a little boring. Whenever you said Jimmy, that just reminded me of the only thing that was kind of tying my memory to that time when I watched the show. And now I remember that Jimmy was pretty much my favorite character and the only character I really followed on that show.
Huh.
Whenever I saw him, I was like, oh yeah, oh duh, I used to watch this. But other than that, I'm like, man, I know I used to watch Superman, but I just can't remember much of it at all.
I forget, Thomas, have you watched any of these before?
I basically had the same history with it as Charlie, where, I would catch random episodes and stuff like that. I remember when they were airing together on WB, I remember they would air back to back. I would watch the Superman theme. Then after that, I would stop. The Superman theme is really, really good because it's also done by Shirley Walker. She also does the Batman theme. And to me, that Superman theme is like one of the best superhero themes. So I would always listen to that, but then I would basically just like give it a couple of minutes and see, here we go. Let's see if this will hook me this week. And then it never does. And I never really watched it. Superman, I got more into my knowledge of the DC animated Superman was more from Justice League, that series of cartoons, where I like him a lot there because the focus isn't so heavy on him.
Yeah, and that's probably it needed to be more of, like, because there's not even a Clark Kent episode where he has to do something as Clark Kent. I think there's one where he's investigating, but he
Really?
dies halfway through. So it's just like they don't ever really focus on his other identity that often because he just quickly changes to go to Superman again.
Sad. There is so much you can do with just Clark Kent.
And when this show came on the air, I remember for a Christmas present, I got the entire Death of Superman run because I think Death of Superman had finished like a week or two prior to that Christmas. And then I was hooked on Superman and buying those, and my dad would buy them for me, and I would follow the entire storyline of his death, the reign of Superman, funeral for a friend, all the way up to his return. And then I followed the comics for like a full year after he came back from the dead, and then gave up on them because the stories weren't interesting anymore. I was just getting bored with it, and I was not getting bored with Spider-Man and Robin, so I just dropped all the Superman titles and only read Robin and Spider-Man after that. And so that show probably came on the air like a year after I already was like, I'm done with Superman. So
I was going to say, like, how did they never do an episode where something in the environment is suppressing Superman's superpowers and he has to behave as Clark the whole time or has to just do things with regular human strength. That's not an
Well, they
episode?
have. Well, they wouldn't make it wouldn't be noteworthy to make a singular episode about that because that kind of thing comes up in pretty much every episode where I'm sure that they have, like, I'm not like a Superman animated series expert, that they have done like heavy Clark Kent episodes, but Clark Kent, he's in those episodes a lot. Like when you think about the Batman animated series, there are definitely a lot of episodes where Bruce Wayne doesn't really show up that much in a singular episode. As far as the balance with Superman, Clark Kent's in it a lot. I mean, even though
Yeah.
the episode isn't.
But that's the problem. He's in it, but he does nothing. He immediately changes to Superman.
Yeah, he's usually like, like they see, some Lois or Joey or somebody sees a crime and Superman's around, and here's the scene where Clark has to slip away to go change into Superman. That's kind of usually the formula.
I don't think in the entire series, maybe once, does he ever come back and be like, oh man, some structural whatever thing fell on the door and I was trapped in the bathroom. and then like Lois could be like, again?
Right. I feel like that happens a lot in Spider-Man, but I don't think Batman and like Superman, I think they just brush over that. But that's fine. So
this first episode, what do we learn about Brainiac? The first episode is unusual. It's a 3-parter about the origin of Superman, but it is really the origin about the destruction of Krypton and how Superman baby flew to Earth, because he doesn't show up. He's a baby in this episode, and he'll be a teenager in part 2. But this is mainly about Superman's father trying to investigate what's going on with the planet while listening to the supercomputer Brainiac, who seems to take his data and tell the council, well, he had an idea, but it's wrong. The planet's safe. And he's just like, what the heck? Why is this computer lying? He's got to be lying. He eventually has to break into the building to try to prove it, and Brainiac's just like, yep, planet's done, so I'm trying to save myself. You guys are all screwed. Bye. And just transfers all of his consciousness and all the history of any data that he can on everything about Krypton into a satellite, and the planet explodes. The end. Basically like a prequel story. But at the time, it was new for Brainiac because Brainiac had never been connected to Krypton before.
Okay, all right.
In the comics, there's the Eradicator, who was a computer program that I think tried to make Earth a new Krypton, and eventually, okay, he wasn't called the Eradicator. He became the Eradicator when he created a human-like form to take Superman's place after the death of Superman. But still, he was more like a sentient Kryptonian computer, which is probably why it never showed up in the series now, because, now Brainiac is from Krypton.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to ask you because when you first were introducing this episode, you basically said that this episode was focused on introducing you tied this Brainiac to the animated series, and I was like, well, didn't Brainiac exist before the show? But I guess the way you kind of describe it and how Brainiac was kind of like his character was kind of like redefined in this, it kind of reminds me of how Mr. Freeze always existed before the Batman animated series, but the Batman animated series decided to redefine him, and it became like an iconic change, like something that people actually preferred to the original version.
And I don't know who the original Brainiac is, because the 3 years I read Superman, he did not show up. He showed up in the final storyline, Dead Again, that I stopped reading, where Superman has a fight with a villain and crashes into his place where he was buried during Death of Superman, and there's another body inside, and it says it's Superman, which causes Superman to freak out and think that he's either, a clone or a machine, or maybe it's a trick and he's not sure, and it ends up being this reveal. Like, he goes everywhere across the galaxy looking for villains that could have done this, but I guess Brainiac's in a comatose state, and I don't know who he is. He's like a human with these little things on his forehead, and like he just never showed up when I read him, but he ends up being the master villain. But to me, it's just like, I don't know who you are, so it's hard for me to care. But it was a good story on how Superman was just going more and more crazy as to what was happening around him because of this. The only reason the storyline is good is not because of Brainiac, but because of how his actions were affecting Superman and making him crazy, because it was like an 8 or 10 part storyline. So I have no idea who Brainiac is. My only knowledge comes from this cartoon.
Okay, so I guess the one common factor in this episode is, I guess the destruction of Krypton and having to send Clark away. His parents having to send him away to kind of like at least save somebody. So I guess you were saying that Brainiac wasn't really tied to Krypton originally. So what was it about the Kryptonians that just made them decide to just like, okay, we're going to have this AI run stuff, and we always go to him to get the definitive answer, and whatever he says goes. Like, what happened to all the other scientists? Like, certainly somebody had to create and build Brainiac and program that AI. Why is it always just, Brainiac versus Jor-El?
Oh, it's teaching kids never to rely on machines entirely as they grow up. That is the theme of the episode, right?
The other theme of the episode is don't have scientists in your society. Just always ship them away.
Well, here's the deal. The whole society of Krypton looks like it's less than 30 people.
Oh yeah.
Like I was
the
counting
whole entire planet.
I was counting the people in the whole episode just to see how many there were, just for kicks and giggles. There were 3 green security guards, 4 RoboCop police officers, 8 council members, and 10 actual civilians.
Yeah, I was going to say half the
20 people
population
to
is
evacuate.
half the population is cops.
Well, you know why there's audio commentary for this episode, and they said that the studio let them do this despite the fact it was going to cost maybe slightly more money because they're having to produce all these characters and backgrounds that will never show up again except for this episode.
They could have made like generic characters to just have a crowd, or just draw some, some lines in the background.
Oh, there were people dying everywhere when the planet was falling, remember?
No, there's
people were getting crushed by buildings.
There were 4 people dying. Like 4 people got out of the way of falling debris, and there was nobody else on the street. There was no activity.
Well, no, I thought there was you saw people trying to avoid falling buildings.
There were.
That's 4 people trying to avoid.
Yeah, what she's saying is there were
it.
only a handful of people. The only time they showed like regular people just doing regular stuff was when the tremors were happening and destruction was happening.
And then at the end, they use the same few people again with maybe the addition of 1 more. So there might have been like 6 extras altogether running around, but it was
there wasn't any shot of just like here are crowds or here's like a market or
Yeah.
Maybe that was a standards broadcast practices thing where they couldn't show people dying or something like that.
I mean, I didn't mind it. It didn't stand out to me. It just seemed like, okay, you kind of get the gist of it. This society is being destroyed. Okay.
I think it was just a budget thing and an animation thing. I think just for the economy of animating this whole thing, and it's a pilot episode, they just didn't bother to draw too many things. There weren't that many objects in this whole thing.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting, by the way, is I bought the Blu-ray for Batman, the animated series. They actually interview the person that was hired by Fox, who is working for the standard broadcast and practices, and she's on the Blu-ray new film they made for Batman, talking about how she had to edit stuff and tell them stuff that couldn't be used on TV. And there were like 3 or 4 episodes they show her scripts and stuff that she would not allow on TV, and that I thought was pretty interesting. They said it was more lax than it used to be because Fox was a new network, but there's still stuff they couldn't do or show to children. And I wonder if that was, but that was in Fox. This is the WB. So,
are you talking about specifically with Superman or just
with Batman?
Career?
So
with Batman. Okay, yeah, I remember that.
The WB was also a new network, so I don't know if their standards were also more lax or just the same as the old networks. So, I just thought it was interesting, like that Brainiac. Well, not interesting. I just thought Brainiac was kind of stupid. Instead of saying, I'll just save no one, he's just like, I'm going to save myself. He doesn't say why, does he? He just has some self-preservation, it seems like, and tries to save himself and all the data. But he doesn't seem to try to save even just, say, a few dozen people. It's basically like, all humans are irrelevant, so there's no point in saving anyone. I'm like, oh.
Well,
okay.
It's a little bit more nuanced than that. So I guess the reason why he decided the actions were laid out the way they were was because he said, I guess from his calculations, even just trying to attempt to save one person was going to put some piece of data at risk, and he didn't want to lose any of it. He wanted to get all of it out.
He's all about information.
Yes, he made the choice that saving all the information he can was more important than saving like one human. So that's why he just never alerted anybody, because he figured it was too late. Like they didn't have enough time to figure it out. That he knew that Jor-El was right the whole time.
Yeah. It just seems like, even though he's not really, I don't think Brainiac is really got much human emotion in him. When we saw Hardak on Batman, he was clearly just a computer and he did not seem human or have any kind of personality, it seemed like. But Brainiac, even though it doesn't seem he has a personality, it seems like he does have has needs. Like he's like, I'm gonna stop this information, but he also wants to survive. So
I would say that he definitely has some human characteristics. Like he doesn't show any of the good qualities, but you can definitely tell that like there's selfishness there, there's evil, a little bit of sarcasm and stuff like that. He's just an AI who really just the selfishness, that drive to just put the data above all other beings and stuff like that. Yeah, there's a little bit. He doesn't seem as cold as Hardak for sure.
Charlie, what did you think of this first episode before we actually see Brainiac in episode 8? What did you think of him just now in just this episode?
Of Brainiac. He didn't leave me with any impression other than this is a sentient AI that has taken over like Hal, and because it's programmed to control all, he will always feel the need to be in control. And the quippy comments between him and Jarrell were kind of funny. I like that he was, defiant as a computer to the computer operator, which it's not a very ideal situation. I don't know what else to say about him though, besides he's kind of just a Hal trope to me. Like both Hardak and Brainiac, to me they're kind of one and the same, though acted differently, and they just have different degrees of computeriness, I guess.
I think Brainiac is more evil, like a human would be evil. You can see that a Hal or Hardak are just like, okay, you're just following programming. There's like nothing here. You're just doing, what you're programmed to do. Whereas Brainiac seems like more of a, like you can imagine like, okay, we're going to take a human consciousness and put it in a machine. This human's trapped in a machine. He's acting like that.
Well, we'll see later in the next episode, he actually does develop between here and his appearance, his own reason and motivation for doing things.
Which did not exist in his first episode, which was confusing me. Like, I just didn't understand it. Like, why his purpose, well, not his purpose, but like his motivations didn't make sense to me from the first episode.
Oh, in the first episode when he's just trying to save
in the very first episode. But then, yes, when we get to the next episode, he is developed and he makes sense. His motivation then makes sense.
That's just a pure survival instinct. He was about self-preservation in the first episode. That's all he was really about. Mm-hmm. Though Jarrell did allude to how he was data hungry, and the data, was that important to him that he was uploading it to a satellite, so that he could escape with it, but it was totally just, you're not going to shut my program down.
It's the only kind of positive thing about him is that he actually is trying to save all the data of the planet so their destruction won't be in vain, I guess.
Right. So that part makes sense.
But then, of course, he shows up in the next episode, and dear God, but we'll get to any last things on this episode, and we can go straight to that one.
We could talk about the episode itself and its just quirkiness and any of the animation errors or anything else, or do we just want to go on to
just whatever you feel like talking about the episode, because it's not a Transformers episode, so I don't have a structure of all that for it.
Okay.
So when we do other things, I don't have like a whole structure for it.
Because it was kind of a funny episode. It was fun to watch. I enjoyed watching it, but at the same time, I see some things about it that would have made me, I guess, less interested in Krypton and this whole backstory, just because of the way they kind of presented everything.
Like, it makes it seem like they deserve to die if they're this stupid.
It was ridiculous. Like, they had a council of 8 people, and they're kind of like, we don't know how to do anything. Let's ask the internet.
Exactly.
They're like,
Here's
like,
8
ask
guys.
Brainiac.
We need 8 people to do a Google search.
Yeah. And they're like, why? And they just refuse to believe him simply because he's already proposed it before without evidence. He's proposed the idea about Krypton having problems or what's causing it or the future outcome, but he didn't have evidence at first. And now he has the evidence, and they're saying, well, no, you don't. But he's like, but I gave the evidence to Brainiac, so Brainiac must be lying. And they're like, our computer lie? I've never heard of such a thing.
So dumb.
So they just immediately discount
stupid.
that.
Like nobody's ever thought about like, oh, data can be corrupted. There could be a glitch in programming or something like that. No, never.
Let's ask our IT Brainiac administrator. let's give him a call and be like, is there anything wrong with the data? And he'll be like, oh God, the tentacles. And I'm like, oh, something must be going wrong at Brainiac's center.
Okay, there's another reason too. Yeah, I mean, another reason Krypton should have been blown up, like those weird gelatinous organisms with toothy tentacles and visible colons.
Oh yeah,
I mean, those are like, I mean, come on, like one was like emerging from stealth mode. It was like emitting some kind of noxious gas, and then it just locks onto Jor-El's neck. It was like
that was simply put in there to show that Jor-El can also be an action star, and that maybe Superman gets some of that from him.
Ah, that's a good point, because he didn't really, besides jumping out of a window.
Yeah, I was gonna say jumping out of the window. That was
because I thought he was just kind of a scientist. He doesn't seem super, that's for sure. He doesn't do anything special. He just he's just a regular guy who's
And the only other characters in here are his mom and Superman's mom's dad, who happens to be on the council.
Well, not his mom, his wife, Superman's wife. Well, not so.
No, his mom. I forget her name.
You're right. Yeah, Superman's mom, not Jor-El's mom. Sorry, you're right.
Yeah, Superman's mom's dad is also there and like helps them out at the end, because otherwise Superman would not have escaped, and they would have lost all the Kryptons. So
yeah. So I guess the only other little small thing that I noticed that I never really thought about before, which I like that they actually illustrated it during this episode, was as Superman was escaping on the ship. I didn't know that he went through a portal or anything like that. I always just assumed he just traveled normally, but he goes through a portal that opens up, and not only so Krypton blows up behind him, but some of the pieces of Krypton go into the portal with them. So that's how Kryptonite ends up on Earth. Along with them. Like, I never thought about that before, but I like that they touched on that. That actually makes a lot of sense. I'm glad that they, here's some real canon to that.
Yeah.
I've got one more reason that Krypton should not exist. It was freaking boring. I was really upset because one thing that I would have loved to see is like just the environment on Krypton, give a few clues about how many citizens there are, how they live their daily lives. Honestly, I can assume that there are only 5 citizens, and they spend most of their time just meandering about on the city floor, just kicking rocks, just Pokemoning.
I'm just imagining somebody taking an alien from another planet, coming to Earth and saying, all right, you will judge if Earth is going to be blown up or they deserve to survive, but you can only judge it by watching 1 hour of E-entertainment.
Oh God.
I mean, there's no sign of amenities. There's no swimming pools with butlers. There's no space tennis court shopping.
Okay, but it has to be
lattes. There. I don't see any of that. I don't see a fountain. I don't see anything. This is like, what it looks like? It looks like an intergalactic physical plant full of maintenance workers, empty lobbies, and leaf blowers. Nothing to do, no bathrooms. It looked like 2020 out there.
Okay, you're being too hard on Charlie. Like, if they're capable of building an AI like Brainiac, clearly there's some smart stuff. There's some great engineering going on there.
Hella boring. That's what Krypton was. I mean, they could at least show them like, I don't know.
Okay, it's a nerd planet, sure.
They could have been hippies with sitars and hookahs. It could have been levitating and like having transcendental meditation sessions and showing people bending spoons or something.
On the special feature, they said they were trying to make it less boring than the movies and the live action movie and the previous show, where all you see is like crystals everywhere and everyone's so cold and emotionless on Krypton. They said they didn't want to do that for this interpretation.
Like ethereal elf types just kind of floating there in space and
Superman
like
is an elf who
absorbing the solar frequencies or something. but it's like, it looks like there is absolutely nothing to do on Krypton. Just walk around on the dirt floor beneath all the buildings, and
you only
there's
got
5 people to talk to.
22 minutes to show the whole planet before it blows up.
You just cross that right off of Charlie's vacation bucket list. Yeah,
think about Transformers.
Will never be there.
Come on, think about Transformers. Spike and Bumblebee go into like an arcade that's right next to a little restaurant, and you see some kids chilling out in there.
But that's 30 episodes in.
But that's for like 5 seconds. But they do that. They do little things like that all the time to kind of give you an idea that, hey, there's actually people here.
But they didn't do that the first episode.
I'm not. It's not just the first episode. This is Krypton. This is another planet that we'll never
but
see
Cybertron,
again.
There's this big war that happens with the Transformers that led to the Autobots and the Decepticons going off planet. They never touch on that. They never show the war. They never show the strife or the destruction or just regular people on Cybertron.
No, but they showed Cybertron, so we have an idea of what Cybertron is like.
That's not any different in this case, where we see Krypton, we see Cybertron, but we don't see like more regular life. We only see a handful of Transformers, just like we see only a handful of Kryptonians here.
Don't believe that Krypton was fully populated to begin with. I think it was worth blowing up. It just had a bunch of creepy cynical beasts on it. And
Charlie, I never believed in planetary genocide until I watched Star Trek Voyager. And now sometimes the races they come across, there were like 3 or 4 in that whole 7-year run where I was like, this whole race deserves to be wiped out.
You mean you didn't want to just blow up the Voyager itself with
No, I can't do that. They're not like evil or not like, they're just trying to survive. It's okay. But there are some cultures where I'm just like, that show made me very nihilistic.
But come on, Neelix and the captain and
they write Neelix better as the show progresses.
Oh my god, I just want to kill all of them. I want to take them and just wring their necks. 7 of 9. So sorry. I mean, I could not be on that Voyager ship because I would have gone postal by now.
Okay, I don't think I'm ever going to be where you guys are, where you just feel like, okay, I want to kill these people, kill off the entire race.
Charlie wants to kill the Voyager crew
blow
and
the ship.
I want to blow up some of the races they encounter.
Well, exactly. That's a lot. I mean, that's kind of. That's very radical.
I think the people they encounter have a lot more potential than the ones on that ship that keep somehow edging themselves back into time. Getting farther and farther away from home.
Are you watching Voyager, Thomas?
Oh, absolutely not. I don't think I ever want to watch Voyager.
Oh, okay.
I
thought you started watching it, or was that Charlie who started watching it?
I'd been watching it, but
I'm watching
I
Deep
haven't
Space
gotten
Nine.
back to it. I got on like the 7 of 9 arc, where it's like mostly her, and I just kind of got bored. But
that's when the series actually has some good episodes finally, but then you had to put up with 3 seasons of bleh or worse.
Well, that's when Q shows up, and that's when it starts to get like, okay, getting weird now. Like, I don't know.
Just watch the 3 Q episodes, and then, and that's it. That's all you need to watch from Voyager.
Because Q, I mean, it's important because he comes from the next generation and stuff. But yeah, I just kind of fell off there because we were talking about assimilation so much, just like,
like that was like the crew. Like sometimes I don't care about much of the crew. So when 7 of 9 came on, she was actually more interesting than like half the crew already, and had a character arc she was working on. So it's just more interesting than most of the people on that ship.
Absolutely hated 7 of 9. It just really didn't like her at all. I was trying to find redeemable qualities, but I guess I didn't get to the part where I started to like her. I think that's supposed to happen eventually, but yeah, I just never got to that point.
That's funny. But yeah, but that's a whole nother machine-like thing, because then, I'm almost like when you get into the Borg, like, is their consciousness start at the artificial level? That's not like from any human consciousness. Oh, whatever. Let's not do philosophical. On to Superman, where we punch things.
Do we want to jump to the second episode?
Question about that first thing. Does the Phantom Zone come up again? Because that seems very interesting. Was the Phantom Zone destroyed with Krypton, or did it persist? And did the space criminals escape to Earth,
There's a two-parter where Superman takes this machine that's in his ship, because apparently he had an access viewer to the Phantom Zone in his ship, and he takes it to Star Labs, and they're able to make a way to look inside of it, and he sees another Krypton in there who's like, hey man, I've served my time, why am I not out of here? And so he takes her out because she served her time, but she starts getting more and more violent and superior towards all the humans, and so eventually releases this other general, because the two of them had tried to overthrow Krypton's government, and that's why they were thrown in there. And so then they try to take over Earth and make it a new Krypton.
That's a cool idea.
Well, not make it a new Krypton. They just want to rule it because they're stupid.
Like, I like the proposal that he had, and I knew that had a certain significance. He's like, hey, let's evacuate everybody to the Phantom Zone. And everybody's like, oh, the Phantom Zone? Only the worst criminals go there. And I'm like, where is it even? Is it in the core of Krypton? Is it another dimension?
Yeah,
I mean,
another dimension.
They could have
is what
showed
they
it,
establish
maybe.
it.
Yeah.
They don't show it till later when Superman finds it out for himself, because it was in the back of his baby spaceship.
Okay. So yeah, I thought that was it. I wrote that down as an interesting point, because that really sounded like something that was going to come up again. Because I'm like, I remember vaguely a Phantom Zone, so that's gotta be.
Well, that was also the plot of the live action movies 1 and 2, because they set up the second movie in the live action Superman so that the three criminals can show up as the main villains in the second Superman movie.
Oh, okay.
Assuming you guys have seen the live action Superman 1 and 2.
Yeah,
are you talking
I
about
saw
the
it a long
original
time
ones?
ago.
Yeah, 1979,
Okay.
78, 89, 80, those movies.
I've seen the old ones, but way too long ago, and I saw the newer generation Superman movies, and I don't know how many there.
I haven't
So-
watched the new ones, but I've seen the old ones way long.
Yeah,
time
when I
ago.
was little, they kept showing Superman 3 and 4 on TV
That's
all the
how I've
time,
seen them,
but
yeah.
not the originals for some reason. So my mom literally just texted me while we were filming this podcast 5 minutes ago. She said, I watched Justice League. The really
Like
fast guy is funny. And
Oh, the
she
new
said
Justice
that it
League.
was overall all entertaining. And I'm like, okay, Mom. I wonder
That
if
sounds
she's-
like a mom comment.
I wonder if she said she did fast forward through some of the fight scenes because she doesn't like too many violent scenes where people get bloodied a lot.
Mm.
It was just kind of funny. She texted us that while we were talking about this. But I have no.
So what
desire
did she
to see-
watch? Did she watch the original, or did she watch the extended cut, or did she watch the Snyder cut?
If it was on Netflix or Hulu, she watched whatever was there.
I have no idea.
I'm not even gonna bother to tell her there's differences right now.
I think
the,
I've only seen the extended version.
Oh
people
wow.
see.
Okay.
I guess people hated it or whatever. I just like, okay, this is fine. I don't hate it. It was fine.
I'm just not interested in any of them. I haven't watched Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, or Justice League. The only thing I have watched is Wonder Woman and Shazam because they're the only two that interested me.
I've seen both the Wonder Woman movies.
Oh, I still haven't
and
seen 1984 yet. What the heck? Oh, it's because I have nowhere to watch it because WB has their own streaming site now. I'm so tired of all these streaming things. You can never watch a movie you want to anymore. Sorry.
Are they like on a Warner Brothers streaming?
Yeah,
thing,
Warner
or
Brothers
a
owns
Paramount streaming thing
HBO
or
and all this
something?
other stuff. No, Paramount
So it
Plus
would be
is
on
like all
HBO
the
Go.
Star Trek and all the other stuff.
God. Yeah, it's so hard to find things because there's too many subscription services things are split over.
Yeah, that's why I don't like the way, what is it, Disney, Paramount, and the one I just mentioned. I don't like it when the company that makes the movies also has their streaming service. I like it more like Netflix, which is a streaming service for everything else. The same way
Yeah.
Netflix and Hulu are. They're not like companies that actually
Like a
make
third
and produce
party.
the movies. Yeah.
But they're a rota of movies so that you only can get them for a limited time. So it's like it may show up, it may not. You just have to wait for it to like be there.
Because then you have stuff like Disney where they'll just edit stuff and hope you don't care, because Disney has no problem with editing all their materials or not paying attention to their stuff and just putting it up there. Like
Yeah,
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
like
versions.
that. I don't like that.
I
Yeah.
am not a Disney fan at all, but that is just the worst thought that I have. That they will put like maybe don't they own the whole Star Wars franchise now? Like
Yes.
if they put out the old Star Wars, they would edit the crap out of it, wouldn't they?
Yeah. Well,
Like
now
make
that
it, like,
Obi-Wan is out, now
super.
they got to re-edit them again so that it's in line with this story, right? I'm
Oh
just kidding. I haven't
no!
watched any of it, but one of my friends was already ranting on Facebook about how something in the first movie won't make sense now because of what happened in the new Obi-Wan show.
Which
I mean,
comics?
the Obi-Wan show existing already doesn't make any sense because Obi-Wan in episode 4 looks ancient, and this Obi-Wan does not look quite as old.
He's just now went there, right? Isn't it like 15 years before?
I know, but like for you to age that much, like it's in that window between Revenge of the Sith
It's
and
called
episode 4.
suspension of disbelief. Did you watch any
Absolutely
of
not.
the X-Men live
Absolutely
action
not.
movies?
Absolutely not.
Where all of a sudden he looks the same for 30 years, then boom, becomes Patrick Stewart in 5. But anyway, on to the next episode. Brainiac shows up and is just kind of like, oh, hey, Earth, I'm this cool, benevolent alien. I'd like to speak with you all. And
Well,
we
he doesn't
have,
really talk to anybody on Earth. He talks, I guess, Luthor
No, Lex
gets his
Luthor.
transmission, and Lex Luthor decides, I'm going to speak for all of Earth. Just deal with me.
He's got private business deals going on.
With
He's just
aliens.
communicating with extraterrestrials without government knowledge.
For the
It's not
entire
just
planet.
not just a national security issue, but a world security issue.
Yeah, I'm surprised they
What
wouldn't
has
have
happened?
captured and tortured Lex to see what he gave them and all that. But no, he's not arrested or anything. And then he's like, I do like though how he tries to make money out of this situation, and then it blows up in his face because he doesn't realize this possibly benevolent alien could be evil. But he gets punished for it even worse later when Brainiac shows up again. But that's another time. For some reason, the next 2 minutes of our recording was completely blank, so you will now be thrown into the middle of a conversation. We should totally work together and annihilate the universe. I mean, you should totally come with me and join him. And I don't understand why, as a smart computer, he thinks that is going to last long, even if Superman does come with him. I'm like, what is he going to do? Make sure he's a sit? Please don't try to talk to anybody on that planet ever again.
That was really
mean-
screwed up how he tried to enlist Superman. He was like, I will give you a memory if you work for me. And then I'll give you another one and another one. He's like a drug dealer. It's like,
I mean,
give
as
me
we've
another
seen,
memory,
we've
please.
seen from the first episode and his dealings with Lex, Brainiac does have a tendency to think ahead. So I'm pretty sure he knew that probably wasn't going to work. But he probably was hoping to be able to at least give him the opportunity, or at least get his defenses down so he could like control Superman somehow with some, I don't know, some kind of invention or something like that.
But he doesn't know about kryptonite yet. So Superman eventually finds out, and it doesn't seem like the fight is that hard, right? So I'm just like, Brainiac, did you not plan this out very well?
Oh, you mean when they were initially testing him, or after?
No, when he was fighting him at the end of the episode.
Okay, so that's going to touch on something that I'm just like, this is the prime reason why I don't really like Superman. You were saying he's fighting him, and it doesn't really seem that difficult for Superman. And I'm just like, I'm watching this, and I'm watching, okay, he's hitting him, he's punching him, he's doing all this stuff to him. I'm like, okay, which one of these attacks is going to be the one that just arbitrarily makes Superman buckle? Because Superman does is like, he just sits there and then, oh, I can't really move out of the way even though I have super speed. I'll just get hit in the face. Mm-hmm. And he keeps letting that happen. And then eventually Superman's just like, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. And then he just wins. And I'm just like, that kind of thing happens. All the episodes I've watched, that's basically what happens in every episode, where Superman just doesn't know how to fight, or he chooses not to fight. He just chooses to get beat up, and all of a sudden, kryptonite's not involved. He'll fake like getting hurt or something like that, and then he just decides, okay, I'm going to end this fight. And it's always that every episode, and it's hard. It's hard to It's hard to not think about that, especially with Superman's fighting style, where he just chooses to get hit. And I'm just like, all these fight scenes are always just a waste of time.
Well, they tried to make him weaker in this show so they could actually have him fight people more like on their level. Like, so he wasn't just ultra and super invulnerable and stuff.
Yeah, and I have noticed that there's certain times where I'm just like, well, I know that he's way more capable than this. Why is this even like a thing? But I guess they just chose to artificially limit him at times. And
You mean like how he gets caught in a medieval stockade style piece of technology that's
and
what Brainiac can whip up,
and how pointless was the test in the beginning? He's like, "Oh, I just wanted to test your powers, even though I totally don't have the ability to scan the planet for television broadcasts on your, many feats." I was like, "This will get him to trust me by randomly attacking him and then apologizing for it."
Oh, well, I get that. He just wanted to test him. And he probably couldn't tell how strong he was just from, he couldn't see the limits of his strength just from watching some footage or something that Luthor gives him.
Yeah, but also, I don't know, as a kid or if this would be terrifying, but he's like, here's this memory thing. I'll let you touch it for a bit. And it's like scene of Krypton. And he's like, oh yeah, it's all the data I have on Krypton before it exploded. I go and collect data on other worlds. And then eventually Superman is to touch one of the other orbs. I forget why. Does he not trust Brainiac, or does he just go do it anyway?
Anyway, and I can't believe Brainiac. Well, Brainiac is absorbed with getting the information from Lex's thing, so he's distracted. So Superman just kind of comes in and is just like, I'm gonna look at all these different orbs right now. Like he's just touching the orbs. Like he touches somebody else's orb, and there's a case for the Krypton sucks again, because all these other worlds look way better than Krypton that he looked at that are being destroyed.
Oh my god!
But the worst thing is, like, he touches every orb, a few orbs, and realizes that they all end with Brainiac coming in and destroying the entire planet. And there's hundreds of those marble memory balls on
yes.
Thousands. I was like, Jesus Christ!
Brainiac's body count is insane. Like
how many planets has he killed? All because Krypton didn't know how to program AI correctly.
I like the first one he touched. It was like a planet with people in togas. There's like a rich family life. He shows the dad like throwing a kid up in the air, benches, fountains. Well, I guess it wasn't a fountain, but I mean, you can imagine that's what I would want Krypton to look like. But then it shows their flaming spaceship as they were trying to escape or something. I mean, it doesn't explain it. It just shows like a little tiny spaceship in flames outside the planet, and then the planet exploding.
Well, and this is the thing that makes little sense to his motivation, but because he speaks to Superman and is like, "Why did you kill all those planets?" And he's just like he said, "Knowledge is more knowledge."
Well, I have the line. I'll read it.
Yeah, read it.
He says, "The fewer beings who possess the knowledge, the more precious it becomes."
Yeah, and that just sounds like a really demented, human would say something like that. So it seems like that's sort of like a humanistic kind of thing he's developed. Because he could just go to the planet, absorb all their data, and leave. He doesn't have to kill them all. Wipe them all out.
Yes. Oh my God, dude. His motivation in the first episode makes sense. But then once they introduce this other development, this makes no sense. Because like you said, he could easily just go get their knowledge and then move on. And then if he really cares about gathering data, why not let those societies produce even more data for him to come back and get that?
That's what always my question is with the Borg on Star Trek. How can they collect any new data if they assimilate every single being on the planet? Why not just assimilate 20% and move on, or 50%, and then come back in 100, 200 years and see what other new technologies they've created. Instead, they'll never create any more technology because you fucking wiped them all out. So you're left with whatever you stole, and you just become a race that can't invent anything because you only harvest what you find. But with Brainiac, I feel like he's got some kind of mental problems. Despite being a computer, he wants to feel important, so he's making himself important.
Yeah, so that is definitely like a human. That's
Yeah,
another
he's
thing
got
that
an
sets them
ego.
apart from like the old other guys or other types of robots that are just more logical. Like this doesn't make any sense. The other thing that I don't like about this particular motivation is, okay, even if you chose to just figure out some way to like, okay, I'm gonna take all this knowledge and then kill off everybody so I don't have to come back here. That would make more sense. Why does he value the knowledge being more valuable, more precious? Like, what does that mean to him? Why does he care about his data increasing in value?
And you know what? We'll never learn the answer because after this episode, his sole focus is to defeat Superman.
Oh,
Just
really? Throughout the whole
just
series?
increasing in
Yes.
intrinsic value. He's not looking for money. What is the
He
point?
shows up maybe for one more episode. He basically is in LexCorp's computer, and he basically kidnaps Lex and forces him to build him a body. That's why, actually, I think it's one of the few times maybe Clark gets involved because he's trying to figure out why Lex isn't responding to anything. And I think his bodyguard is also like, why isn't Lex responding to anything? And it's
Oh,
because
right.
Brainiac's like forcing him to make a new body because he only exists inside LexCorp's computers right now as Data.
Now, am I getting it confused with this series, or was it a Justice League thing? But didn't they end up getting merged at some point? Like
Yeah,
Brainiac's inside of Luthor's head or something like that?
well, Brainiac apparently does not just this with Lex, but with Bruce Wayne. He apparently copied himself into Wayne's computers and LexCorp's computers
Oh my goodness.
because
That's
they were on
funny.
a joint project. So what ends up happening is so I don't know if, like, for all I know, it's two separate Brainiacs. They're both the same downloaded copy and don't know the other one did this thing. Because there's an episode where Superman pretends to be Batman. Robin's trying to get him to find out where he is. And it's because Lex has him basically captured to work on like rockets or something to blow up the planet. I don't remember. But anyway, Brainiac shows up again and then he gets destroyed again forever. And then he doesn't show up again until that big reveal you're talking about where he's been inside, Lex's body this whole time and becomes Lex Brainiac.
I mean, I like Brainiac. Like I've always thought he was one of the more interesting Superman villains, but this actual focus on his origin and his motivations, that's kind of like taking him down a notch. Well, no, it doesn't. I think it's dumb, but his purpose as a villain is still pretty much untouched. He can still do that whether or not his motivations make sense or not. So it's just whatever to me.
What if there's an infinite amount of worlds to conquer? I mean, I guess the computer never gets tired and he'll just go on forever destroying worlds because there's always more.
And you could always buy into nobody's able to actually completely destroy him because he's Data and he's, he theoretically could just have copies all over and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Oh, and in that episode, he only makes a spaceship to leave Earth. He doesn't have a master plan. It's just, I want to get the F out of here. So they just like destroy a spaceship so he can't leave to go rebuild himself and then just destroy more of the universes.
Oh, I've got it. Basically, Brainiac is just like an intergalactic virus, and he's self-replicating for no purpose other than to just replicate.
Yeah. He doesn't ever it just seems like after he got defeated by Superman once, he's like, I will dedicate my whole life to killing him until I continue my universal absorption plan. And that's all he ever does.
Which
only a
also doesn't make
Kryptonian could
sense.
shut him down, I guess, because they created him. That's the only reason I could think of he would pursue Superman over and over. I think that's his only fear. As long as somebody from Krypton exists that knows that he's just a weak computer AI, then he's got a weakness. Otherwise, he wouldn't have any weaknesses.
I just think it's where they never really follow up on this character trait. It just seems like all he wants to do is fight Superman. One thing that's funny is I'm surprised that it would have been interesting to show him take the orb that had all of Krypton on it and threaten to destroy it in front of Superman as a way to get him to stop when he realized he was losing. Because then maybe Superman could have called his bluff and then he would have seen that, Brainiac does actually care about the data and can't bring himself to destroy it. That would have been a little more character insight instead of just, hey, come help me kill the universe. Punch, punch. Ugh.
been a good idea. Just be like, okay, I'm going to delete this bit of data now. And he's like, no, don't delete that.
Oh yeah,
And it
Superman
just
could have done it, threatened to do it too, and that would have made him freak out. That's another way to do it. Wait, how did you know how to use my alien computers? Oh, I'll just smash the keyboards. No! You'll cause a short circuit that will explode things, because that's what happens when you smash a computer in cartoons.
pretty sure he like he's replicated himself all around the planet though, thanks to their pretty crappy IT setup. I mean, there's no system like that that's just gonna feed into all of the systems worldwide, all the military systems. That is just such a bad idea. I mean, all he had to do was overwrite the OS and set up a firewall. They're like, oh my God, he set up a firewall and now he's using his own OS on our computers. And we're connected to everything on Earth. We can't even launch missiles. That was like the worst situation. It's so crazy. Like, nobody would do that. I mean, if they were
I
gonna...
guess they had the military's computers there at Brainiac's arrival just in case, because they wanted to have missiles ready to shoot him in case he was, an evil alien.
Those were Lexus missiles. The
Oh, those
military
were
wasn't
Lexus
involved.
missiles. Okay. I was gonna say, the
Realistically,
government doesn't have portable missile command code
realistically,
carriers.
they would create a whole nother network to download him into that was separate from everything.
Mhm.
Wouldn't touch anything else. But yeah, just for the sake of the show, it's just like, okay, that would make sense why he would get into Bruce Wayne's computer too, since all of it's connected together.
It's funny, I actually played the Superman PlayStation 2 game last year that's based on this animated series. It was pretty fun. It's like an okay game, but you do get to go around. There's like one or two Brainiac levels where you just have to go and fight him, but it's like you just punch the crap out of him and he dies. So, I forget what the level is now. God, it was because it was a year ago that I played it, but I just remember it being fun because they actually do have all the characters from the cartoon in it that you can fight. But anyway, what did you guys think else of this episode?
I looked at a bunch of funny details in this episode. Did you notice the Kryptonian language? It was made up of Japanese katakana, Romanized characters. There was Hangul. There was like some Arabic characters on there.
That's funny.
I thought that was pretty funny. There's a point when Superman was going to see Brainiac, and a bunch of floating robots come to attack him, and they're shooting from the groin at him.
That's funny.
I thought that was pretty funny. And yeah, it's like the episode was pretty entertaining. I had a good time with this one.
Thomas, what about you? Did you enjoy watching this episode? Any other final thoughts on this one?
Outside of the two irritating points, I thought it was fine. Like I like watching it. I think I probably liked this more because it wasn't just really just Superman heavy. So I do like the two stories together.
That's all we got for this episode then. Thanks for listening. You guys ready to sign off then?
Yep.
Let's go for it.
Okay, signing off. This is Sean.
Charlie.
And Thomas.
Good night.